So today on Sportsfall, we're taking the second part look at the what if with the Eric Lindros deal. Now, as we talked about before in part one, Eric Lindros was drafted by the Quebec Nordiques when their number one pick in the 1991 NHL entry draft. Lindros had basically said he wasn't going to play for the Nordiques run by a person he didn't respect, Marcel Aubout. Aubout was basically in a holdout position when Lindros for a year. There were different monetary offers made, but eventually Aubout came to a agreement with the Philadelphia Flyers to trade him for Mike Ricci, Rod Brind'Amour, Mark Recchi, Steve Duchesne, Ron Hextall, Dominic Roussel, and multiple first-round draft picks. But Aubout decided to renege on that deal and came to a verbal agreement I guess an hour later, to trade the rights to Lindros for Sergei Nemchinov, Tony Amonte, Alex Kovalev, James Patrick, and either John Van Beesbrook or Mike Richter, either one great quality goalies, sort of draft picks and $20 million. Now here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. We talked in the previous podcast what would happen if Lindros would have stayed in Quebec. But him not going to the Flyers led to some positive time for the Flyers. They made the Stanley Cup Finals in '97, unfortunately losing into the final to the Detroit Red Wings. Now we all know that the Rangers won the Stanley Cup in 1994, led by Mark Messier and a great team put together by Mike Keenan. But let's say in early 1992 that the Ranger deal would have went ahead. What would have happened? Well, undoubtedly they may have not tried to get Messier down the road, and maybe they would have won the Cup in '93 with Lindros and that great Ranger lineup that was already there, but that's all conjecture at this point. We often believe that the Rangers were the best fit for Lindros. He ended up being playing with the Rangers later on, but as it finalized, he went to the Flyers for a bastion of good players, including Ron Hextall, Kerry Hoffman, Peter Forsberg, a first-round draft choice, some really Steve Duchesne, very good quality players. Now, later on, when Lindros his trade value went down, he wasn't worth the 10 or 14 players that were being discussed. But the whole NHL would have changed as well if the Rangers would have taken over Lindros' contract. I think that basically the Flyers and the Rangers were in a great position in the early 90s to make a cup run. We saw that in 97 with the Flyers. The Flyers were a lot more competitive after they picked up Lindros. But I think the Rangers would have been a better team if they would have picked up Lindros rather than Messier, and I tell you why. Messier was basically limited on certain his road play. Lindros was a scrapper. He was a fighter. He could hit in every situation. He probably would have been augmented by Messier. But when Messier took the full load, the Rangers surrounded him with a great cast of supporting characters, which cost them, future prospects and money. But I really think that Lindros was destined for a Stanley Cup final. It would have been with the Rangers, might have been with Quebec, might have been with the Flyers, which it was. But I think with all the machinations and his concussion syndrome and different problems, and that was a different NHL back then, because most times the NHL wouldn't step in when there was money involved. Now, with the Flyers, unfortunately, he did part ways in 2001, actually after he had a year-long holdout. And although the Rangers got great value for Lindros, by the time they got him, his best years were past him. Lindros later went on for Toronto Maple Leafs, had a partial good season, but the timing was wrong. Again, three scenarios: if he would have stayed in Quebec, Quebec would have won the Cup and stayed in the league. Second scenario, like you saw, the Flyers made that Cup final in '97 and put them on a stronger level, almost like when they were as big in the mid-'70s. But I think with the Rangers would have been a better value in the long term for Lindros, because again, the Rangers had a good farm system. They could augment probably any player that would come in. But it was kind of interesting to see Messier and Lindros playing together later on, because not only were they're good for each other, they put together some really great games. So again, if you have a chance to read up about the Eric Lindros trade, there's various documentaries online. Wikipedia breaks it down quite efficiently. Actually, I was very surprised the other day when I found out Detroit was interested in him. And I guess it wasn't just Steve Yzerman. There was a up-and-coming prospect that we're looking at to put in the trade, but it has never been stated who that up-and-coming prospect was. So I ever found out, I might do a podcast of when Steve Yzerman was almost traded. Because if you shopped around for Lindros, he might have been shopped around for other players. And as we know from the Gretzky trade, anybody can be traded. Reggie Jackson was traded. As bizarre as that may sound, he was traded before he was a free agent. So the Lindros legacy, he's a Hall of Famer. I respect him as a player. He changed the way the power forwards are looked at. But I don't think you'll ever see another player like Eric Lindros ever again, because the NHL has completely changed. There's more of a European influence. There's less fighting. In many ways, there's less hitting. And concussion syndrome is going to, the limited amount of risk players are going to take. So, again, on this cold snap January afternoon, we tell you to keep your stick on the ice. If you still have those Eric Lindros cards around, save them, because, they're still worth a little bit. Especially the game-worn jersey versions. Hope this finds you well. Have a good day. Bye.